Someone punched Dana Evans in the face inside the building she was born in, and she came back to work, not because she was strong, not because she had processed it, because she had nowhere else to go. I think that sentence is the whole character. But to understand it fully, I need to take you back to a fact the show gives you once, casually, and then mostly moves past. Donna Evans was born in Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center. She volunteered there in high school. She became a nurse there in 1993. And she has not left since. That is 30 plus years in one building. The same corridors, the same department, the same charge desk, the same institution that was present at the beginning of her life, now present for every working day of her adult life. And I've thought a lot about what it means that the show gives us that detail and then mostly moves on from it. Because I don't think it's just biography. I don't think it's a charming bit of character texture that tells us Dana is a Pittsburgh girl through and through. I think it's the whole story. And I think once you understand what it means that Dana Evans has never really left the place she was born, everything else that happens to her, everything the show puts her through, lands completely differently. Because here's what I keep coming back to. The ER is not Dana's workplace. It's the only home she has ever had. And in season 1, someone inside that home hit her in the face, and she came back anyway. Not, I want to be precise about this, not because she is fearless, not because she is invincible, because she has nowhere else to go. And the show knows that. It's in every frame of season 2, if you know what you're looking at. Let me take you back to what I think is the most underrated fact about Dana Evans. And it's not the assault, though we're getting there. It's the 30 years before it. 30 years in one ER. Think about what that accumulates. Dana has been punched and kicked and spat on and had things thrown at her that I'm not going to catalog here because she has, on more than one occasion, cataloged them herself with a kind of dry precision that tells you she's been counting for decades. She has held the hands of people in the worst moments of their lives and then walked back to the charge desk and picked up the next chart. She has watched colleagues burn out and leave and been the constant, the thing that didn't change, the presence that was always there, the person who knew where everything was and how everything worked and who needed what before they could articulate it themselves. She became, over 30 years, the most essential person in that building. And I think that happened. I genuinely think this is where it came from. Because essential was the only form of belonging she ever fully trusted. The actress who plays Dana said something in an interview that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I read it. She said, the ER is where Dana gets all of her self-esteem, all of her sense of self. And then she said something else, where she hides. I want you to hold that alongside the woman you watch on screen. The one with the commanding presence and the dry wit and the maternal authority that keeps an entire emergency department running through every kind of crisis imaginable. The one who can read Robbie's psychological state better than Robbie can, who names his martyr complex to his face and doesn't flinch, who has been the emotional intelligence of that building for 3 decades. Hold that woman in your head, and then sit with the idea that she has been doing all of it, in part, to avoid having to be somewhere quieter, somewhere that would require her to look at herself the way she looks at everyone else. Because here is the thing about Dana that the show builds towards so quietly, you almost miss it. She can see everyone's truth. She sees Robbie's grief before he acknowledges it. She sees Langdon's desperation before anyone else is willing to name it. She sees what every nurse on her floor needs before they ask. She is, professionally and personally, one of the most perceptive human beings on television right now. And she cannot see that she is doing the exact same thing she calls Robbie out for. She is hiding in the work, using other people's crises as a reason to stay in motion, to stay necessary, to stay in the one context where she knows exactly who she is and what she's for. The irony of that is almost too much. The woman who sees everything, hiding in plain sight of everyone she sees. Now, I have to talk about the assault, because nothing in Season 2 makes sense without understanding what it actually took from her. Doug Driscoll punches Dana in the face, on shift, in her department, in the building she was born in. And the physical injury, I'm not minimizing it. It was real and it was significant. The physical injury is actually the smallest part of what happened. Here's what the actress said about it, and this stopped me completely when I read it. She said Dana never thought it would happen to her. She described it like the way Aretha Franklin reportedly said nobody was going to throw paint on Aretha. Donna had that kind of relationship with her own safety in that ER. It wasn't arrogance, it was 30 years of accumulated certainty. This was her place. She was known here. She was respected here. She was, in every sense that mattered to her, protected here. And then she wasn't. And I think what shattered in that moment wasn't just her sense of physical safety, it was the entire architecture of meaning she had built around that building. The 30 years of investment that said, this is where I matter, this is where I'm safe, this is where I know who I am. All of that was standing on the assumption that the hospital was hers, that it would hold her the way she had spent her career holding it. And Doug Driscoll walked in and disproved that assumption with one punch. And Dana took her photos down from the workstation at the end of the shift. She was going to leave. She was seriously, genuinely going to leave. And I don't think people have fully reckoned with how significant that is. This is not a woman who dramatically threatens resignation. This is a woman who has been in the same building for 30 years. Leaving was not in her framework for how life works, and she reached for it. Because staying meant admitting that the home she built her entire self inside was also the place that hurt her. She didn't press charges. I've thought about this a lot. And I want to be careful here because people make this choice for valid reasons, and I'm not in the business of judging it. But in the context of who Dana Evans is, and what the show then does with her in Season 2, I think not pressing charges is one of the most revealing things we know about her. Because Dana Evans is a woman who has spent 30 years making sure people are held accountable, who enforces the rules of her department with a kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to raise its voice, who in Season 2 literally rips a sign off a wall and puts it in a patient's face to remind him that assaulting healthcare workers is a felony. That is not a woman who doesn't believe in consequences. That is a woman who cannot make herself be the one who needed them. Being the victim required a framework she didn't have. It required her to sit in the position she has spent her entire career helping other people survive, and she could not do it, not for herself. She went back to work instead. She took a few weeks off, and then she came back to the building that assaulted her, and she picked up the chart and kept going, and she carried the verse. This detail, I keep coming back to this detail. In Season 2, when another patient threatens one of Dana's nurses, it comes out that Dana has been carrying a sedative in her pocket, ready, prepared, in case Doug Driscoll ever comes back. She has been walking into that building every shift with a chemical defense in her pocket because she cannot make herself feel safe there anymore, and she will not admit that she cannot make herself feel safe there anymore. That is not a woman who has processed what happened to her. That is a woman in a continuous, managed, invisible state of hypervigilance who is calling it preparedness. Now here's the scene I genuinely think is the most important scene for understanding Dana Evans in the whole run of the show. And it's not the assault, it's the rape kit. A young woman comes in, sexual assault. And Dana, who is a sexual assault nurse examiner, takes her through the process with a care and a precision and a level of empathy that is genuinely moving to watch. And at some point during all of this, Dana opens the refrigerator where the rape kits are stored, and she finds one that's already there, an old one, unprocessed, just sitting in the cold, waiting for law enforcement that never came to collect it. And then, a few hours later, she watches 2 federal ICE agents walk into that same ER, resources, badges, authority, presence, for a completely different purpose. I need you to feel what that sequence is doing. the kit that nobody came for, and the agents that came without being asked. And Dana standing in the middle of it, furious in a way that has been building for 2 seasons towards something she has not yet been able to name. Because here's what I think is happening in that storyline that the show is almost saying, but not quite. Donna wants that young woman to press charges. She advocates for her carefully and appropriately without pressure. She wants it for her. And part of why she wants it so much is that she couldn't do it for herself. She is trying, through this patient, to close a loop that has been open since the night Doug Driscoll walked out of her ER and she chose not to follow it through. She is doing for someone else what she could not do for herself. Sound familiar? I noticed that pattern in another character on this show, and I think the writers know exactly what they're doing by putting it in Dana too. The best caregivers in that building are the ones who cannot caretake themselves. That is not a coincidence. That is a thesis. Now I want to talk about what Dana does with Robbie in season 2, because this might be the moment that reveals the most about her, and it's easy to watch it as a scene about him. Dana confronts Robbie. She names his martyr complex. She tells him his real anger is directed at himself. She tells him to stop tormenting himself about whether the ER will survive without him. She sees him precisely, accurately, with the kind of clarity that can only come from 30 years of watching people perform their damage in front of her. And Robbie deflects, turns it back on her, accuses her of being on edge since the assault, and she walks away. Here's what I couldn't get past the first time I watched that scene. Both of them are right. Dana is right about Robbie. His martyr complex is real. His anger is directed inward. His relationship to that hospital is consuming him. And Robbie is right about Dana. She is on edge. She has not processed what happened to her. She is keeping herself in motion specifically to avoid it. 2 people who can diagnose each other perfectly and cannot, will not, apply the same diagnosis to themselves. That scene is not about Robbie. It's about Dana using Robbie as a mirror she then refuses to look into. The actress who plays her said something else that I've been sitting with. She said she doesn't think Dana feels safe anywhere anymore. Not anywhere. Not her home, not her neighborhood, not the building she was born in, nowhere. I want you to understand the full weight of that. Dana Evans was born in this hospital. She has organized 30 years of her life, her identity, her sense of self and worth and meaning around this institution and the work she does inside it. And she no longer feels safe there, and she no longer feels safe anywhere else, which means she is a woman who has lost the only home she has ever known without having anywhere else to go. And she is still showing up, still running the charge desk, still protecting her nurses and her patients, and even the doctors who take her for granted, still carrying the worst. Here's the thing that gets me about Dana Evans. The thing I can't resolve, no matter how I approach it. In 30 years at that hospital, she has sat with thousands of people in the worst moments of their lives. She has asked the questions that matter. She has held the space. She has been the person who made it possible for other people to be honest about what happened to them and what they need and what they're afraid of. She is extraordinary at it. It might be the thing she's most extraordinary at out of all the extraordinary things she does, and I do not think anyone has ever done it for her. Not really. Not with the same patience. Not with the same refusal to let her deflect. Not with the same willingness to sit in the discomfort of the question until she actually answers it. She went home after the assault, and, according to the actress, her daughter encouraged her to try therapy and self-defense classes. Her daughter, not a colleague, not the institution she's given 30 years to. Her daughter, from outside the building, reaching in to try to get her mother some help, and Dana came back to work. Because the work is where she makes sense, even now, even when it's also the place that hurt her. Because 30 years of building your entire self inside one institution doesn't leave a lot of room for an identity that exists outside of it. The show called her the backbone, the anchor, the most essential person in the building, and all of that is true. But I think the more honest word, the one the show keeps circling without landing on, is this. Donna Evans is the person everyone in that building goes to with their wounds. And she has been going to that building with hers for 30 years and leaving them at the door. Not because she doesn't have them, because walking through that door, picking up that chart, becoming charge nurse Dana again, that was the one thing that made them manageable. Until someone in that building made a wound she couldn't leave at the door, and now she's in there every shift with it. Carrying it in her pocket in a syringe, pouring it into advocacy for patients who deserve better than she was willing to demand for herself. Watching everyone else's truth with that clear, precise 30 years practiced eye. Unable to look at her own, the show is going to keep asking her to. I believe that. I think season 2 is the beginning of Dana Evans having to reckon with the fact that the hiding place stopped working, that the home she built her whole self inside is also the place she's most afraid of now, and that being the backbone of everything around her has left almost nothing to hold herself up with. She was born in that building. She has given it everything she has. It is past time for it to give something back.